Good evening, all. Happy to again connect with you and then talk about temple architecture. Today, we are going to cover the third part of the Dravidian temple architecture. This was presented in Stapathya Kala Parishad 2 weeks ago. This is a remastered recording to cover some of the segments. Let us see in detail the third part of the section. So this is the third lecture. This was posted in 6 September in Stapathya Kala Parishad and due to some technical issues, it was not being we are not able to host it immediately. So we are doing a remastered, re-recorded content in 3 parts. In the earlier videos, we have covered in part 1 evolution of temple architecture and how worship was evolved. Second part, we have covered the Dravidian temple architecture, the units and parts. So today, in the third part, we are going to cover the development under various dynasties of Tamilnadu and what are the various innovations they took part in doing these temples to the great level. So, if you see this, in part 1 we covered the evolution of temples, worship in Tamil Nadu, the forms and materials, and some amount of context setting on what are the benefits you are going to talk out of this, and then what are the reference material. So you can see the part 1 for acknowledgement and context setting and other details. In part 2, we covered the Dravidian temples architecture in detail. What are the component units? And then we went in detail about the components of vimanas, mandapas and gopuras in detail. So before seeing this video, I would suggest you to view the earlier components so that you are familiar and you are able to understand many of the terms which we are going to discuss in detail in various temples. So today in this session, we are going to talk about 3 separate areas. One, the temple unit evaluations over a period of time, how a small single cell temple expanded into a grand temple city, and then how it was achieved over a period of around 1,000 years by various dynasties, each one contributing in its own way. And we are also going to see some unique examples in the engineering fields and the variations in constructions. So let us go to the first section, the temple units evaluation. In terms of evaluation, what was there as a small temple here with a Garbhagriha, we are seeing the grand temple city of Srirangam in Trichy. Okay, the Garbhagriha is somewhere over here. So to reach that, you need to travel from here all the way in section. You have 7 prakaras and then so many gopurams and then so many structures. It is a city by itself. Interestingly, town bus also plays inside. So this is how it evolved. We are going to see. To touch back on recap, a temple is consisting of a gopuram, and as you enter the Dvajastambha, Balipida and the Vahana Mandapa, and then we enter into Mahamandapa, there is an Artha Mandapa, and we enter the sanctum where the main deity is there. So around this there are many subsidiary temples and then other mandapas spread around that. So this is normally compared to the 6 yoga chakras in your body, and they are equated to the parts of the body. The gopura equated to foot, and the garbhagriha equated to the head, and the various parts mapped to the in between, shoulder, hip, and other waist and other areas. So we are going to see now. This is from Mannargudi temple, one of the biggest temples. The Garbhagriha is somewhere over here, the small mountain, and if you see this, it has expanded with one round of one pragara, additional more mandapas, more temples, and then the entire thing is covered, one round of gopuram, and then again another round of gopuram, some more mandapam, some more function, some more parivara devatas, and then the grand wall. Like that, this is explained. Now it is a huge temple complex. So we are going to see how this is evolved over a period of 1200 years. So for this, I am taking the example of Shiva temples. The light variation is also true for Vaishnava temples or Shakta temples. Initially, the temple was a single cell or a small tower, which is the Garbhagriha. For clarity's sake, I am putting Tamil as well as English content. So this is plain walls, and over a later period, this was, see, if you see the very old temples, normally this will be would have started from age-old Sangam days, or the temples built during Pallava period or early Chola period. So then around this, Devakostas came, like on 3 sides Devakostas came. Later on, the Devakostas got expanded to all the mandapas. Later on, the standard structure of the Dvajastamba, Balipida, and the Vahana Mandapa came in. This is the basic temple. Any rudimentary temples, you will find these parts. Then later on, as the crowd and other things become for comfort and for convenience, they added another mandapa called Ardha Mandapa, which is an addition to the main Vimana. This is primarily meant for people doing puja and coming, and then a shelter for prayer. Later on, when more functions and then more activities happen, this was further expanded by putting an Mahamandapa, where the deities are brought in, the Utshavamurtis are brought in, and the additional ceremonies, pujas and everything happened in the Mahamandapa. So normally this expansion is usually early and then late Cholas, where the Mandapa's expansion happened. And the next development is that around early Chola time, so the Madapalli also developed in a big way in the southeast corner, and then the Vinayaka and Muruga and the Ashtaparivara Devadas started developing from the 800 plus. So there used to be around 8 temples around this location. Then later on, during 1100, late Chola and early Pandya period, okay, the Aman Sannidhi, which was normally part of the Utshavamurtis here, so they started building a separate Aman Sannidhi in all the old temples. So any new temples had their own separate Aman Sannidhi, but many of the old temples, the option was convert one of the mandapams or Mahamandapa and then put it in the north corner. So this is another rule. This is where Navagrahas also started appearing in the northeast corner. Then after that, during the Vijayanagara period, this was Prakaram was entirely covered with walls, and then most of this area is covered, like we see in the earlier picture. This area was roofed and then covered fully, and this is one of the activities of Vijayanagara and Nagara period. They also created a lot of mandapas, 1,000-pillar mandapas, Natya mandapas and others during this period, and they built grand walls around the temple for security. So this was 2, 3, 4, up to 7 prakaras were built, and then these were fixed with all the 4 cardinal direction by grand gopuras, towering structures. So this is how a small temple around, which was existing around 600 CE during Pallava period, expanded into a temple city by 1800, by the end of Nayaka period. Now, having seen the evolution of temple and the expansion of the temple, let us see how this structure was done by the various dynasties. So, if you see the dynasties which that has been ruling South India as well as Tamil Nadu, primarily the from Sangam days, Chera, Chola, Pandyas were there, and then later on Pallavas had a major say during 600 to 800, and then responsible for a lot of innovation and experimentation in this. Later on, after the fall of the Chola Pallava, Vijayanagara took over, and then they also did a lot of innovations. And during later period, Hoysalas also pitched in Trichy area and in Salem area with their own influence. So let us see what is the influence of the the dynasties in temple building. If you see, before going into the actual temple structure part, let us see why Tamil Nadu is being touted as a temple area and known for its temples. Let us see the facts. In terms of quality of the temples, the grand ones, top 9 out of 10 tallest gopurams in India are in Tamil Nadu. If you see the list, except Murudeeshwara, which is a very 20th century construction, all the gopuras, which are the specialities of Tamil Nadu, the tallest ones are in Tamil Nadu only. Okay. The largest one is a Srirangam one, very recently completed in 1990s. Except that, all these are there for ages from 1400 plus. This is one perspective. Second one, in terms of Vimanas, if you see the height of Vimanas, top 4 out of 10 are from Tamil Nadu. If you see this, the major ones are Tanjavur, Gangakonda Cholapuram, Tirupuram and Dharasuram, which are the 4 grand temples built by Cholas in their heartland. So the cake is taken by Chaduput temple in Jhansi, which is said to have 344 feet. And this is a new one, the new Kasi Vishwanatha temple is around 250 feet. Other than that, all these are old temples, and then the core is evenly split between Tamil Nadu with the 4 grand temples and Orissa with 3 grand ones, and 2 in Bhopal region, one Kandariya Mahadeva, and another one planned in a grand way is in Bhopal Bhojeshwara temple. If it is built, it would have been taller than any of this. Then if you see in terms of size, the top 6 temples out of 10 which are in active worship in India are in Tamil Nadu. They are Srirangam, Chidambaram, all these things, through Tanjavur, all are temple cities by themselves, with their own temple tanks and irrigation, granaries, everything. If you see this, Chhatarpur and Akshardham are very recent developments. Belur Math have been existing for some time, and Dakshineshwar is the only other big complex which is outside Tamil Nadu. If we discount Hampi, which is a temple down by itself with a huge collection of temples. So this is in terms of quality of the temples or the greatness of temples. If you see in terms of volume, ASI maintained monuments are around 251. Many of them are very big and some small also. Apart from that, Tamil Nadu government, HRCE, which is responsible for temples, has got a count of around 44,000 temples, out of which the heritage ones, which more than 100 years and listed, registered, are around 3,470. The ones which are recent ones and listed big temples are around 5,000. So, and the rest are sundry small temples. You can see the amount of temples we have. If you see the size, Tamil Nadu has 44, Kerala has 28,000, Andhra Pradesh, integrated Andhra Pradesh 38,000, Karnataka 34, Maharashtra 45, and then Orissa around 33. So if we put below Vindhyas, the entire South India, Maharashtra, Orissa, the Rashtrakuta region, the Chalukya, Chola, if you see this region itself accounts for around 222,000 temples. This is a phenomenal volume. Now let us see in Tamil Nadu, which has got 130 square kilometer area. When you have 44,000 temples, we have for every 3 square kilometers we have a temple. Such is the density and such is the extent of temple building in Tamil Nadu. So having said this context, let us see how this is constructed by the dynasties. First, let us have an overview of how the dynasties have done in a big picture from Sangam days up to the current days. So during Sangam days, the kings to Kalapura, the temples were in wood, mortar, brick and temples, and none of them we are able to see now. All of them have either been destroyed or renovated or rebuilt, except one which we see in Mahabalipuram in Salonkuppam, which is remnants of an 4th century Muruga temple. So if you see the progression, see the another interesting fact when you talk about Tamil Nadu is that except for 2 breaks in between, one during Kalapura period from 400 to 600, and another one during 1300 for around 100 years. There were no interruptions or no invasions or confusions internally. Mostly it was ruled by Hindu kings, and then no major demolition. So relatively, unlike North, the temples and this one have survived to a great extent. Till 1400, okay, there were no major invasions from North, from non-Hindus. So if you see the early Pallavas and Pandyas, they excelled in cutting caves, monoliths and structured rock temples from 600 to 700. So this was followed by the imperial Cholas, 850 to 1150, who did very well ornamented grand temples with their focus was building larger and bigger vimanas. And the notable point they did was converting all the brick wood mortar temples into granite structures. Then this is a grand service. Only because of this we are able to see all the old temples even now. So many of the Sangam period temples have been converted into grand structures during this period. Later Pandyas continued the effort, but the trend is set in. Most of the temples have been converted in stone. So their focus was making it beautiful and then expanding the very, very ornamental gopuras and some amount of mandavas and prakaras, which were rich in structure. This work was taken to the pinnacle by the Vijayanagara. They had a challenging job. First, they had to undo the damage done by the North Indian Muslim nations. They recovered that, restructured the temples, and then when they did it with grand security, high-rise walls and gopuras. And then their work in mandabas, the expansion and the artwork they have done is phenomenal. So now, in the modern era, this was also continued at a later period by Nayakas and Nagaratars by doing a lot of temple tanks and then mandavas, and then the artwork improved and the size of the mandavas went into grand scale. Now we are seeing one by one the dynasties. So the initial dynasty is the early Pallavas and Pandyas during the period from 600 to 800. So this is the period of maximum, I would say, experimentation and innovation. And we had a basic agamas, but this is the period where they experimented all possibilities. So during Mahendra Pallava, the focus was more on cut-in caves, where they are trying new experiment. Even though this was prevalent in other areas, they are trying new experimentation in caves, temples without any wood mortar and other things were structured. Again, the challenge is you need to find first a hillock and then start doing it. Many of them are in remote villages, and then there was a challenge. So we are, but only from this we have some idea of how the earlier temples look like. But mostly, since it is a cut-in, the focuses are more on mandavas. Mandavas on the pillars and the interiors. The next technology comes in monolithic rocks, where carving available rocks into single block into rathas and other things. This was done in Malay by Narasimha Pallava, and it was not repeated anywhere else except Vetuan Koil by Pandyas. The next development was, instead of running around the place looking for boulders and hills, they said we will cut the structured like bricks. We will have huge mounds or shaped component, and then we will start building in the same way like the metal or the wood components. Okay. So this was the base for all the rock based temples, which is the future. And unlike the wooden temples, the granite temples could last for long, but the challenge is, as it become bigger, the load bearing capacity need to be managed in a better way. So by the time of Nandivarma, he took a leaf out of Narasimha Pallava's first attempt, and then he started Ashtanga Vimana style, where managing the vertical space and building more sanctums in the Vimana itself. and this is the first apartment of gods. So this was done as per the Navamurti Sthavana Vidhi of Vaishnava Agamas, and following this, many shrines were built in the same style. Nandivarma took this into the next level by putting these temples in a grand pedestal and also expanding it on 4 sides, so that instead of 3 shrines, he went up to 9 shrines in 3 levels and expanding into a most complex temple. So this is the experimentations during the Pallava period. So when you look at cut-in caves, they had done all. They had done all sorts of experiments in managing this. But the focus is predominantly on the pillars, the facade, and the shikara part was not at all focused. So the Dharmaraja plainly rudimentary mandapa. So this one has got 2 styles of pillars for Ardha Mandapa and Maha Mandapa, so that you get confused. Tirumurti, 3 sanctums in sequence, and then they started trying the Shikara part also. And then Maharatoranam and other experimentation also comes in. Now, Varaha is a pinnacle, excellent, well-developed pillars, and then panels start appearing on the walls, and then the roof part is well developed. In Ramanuja Mandapa, extensive, and then Vallabhi and other things are well developed inside, like any other normal temple. The Vimana portions start coming, and the replica of Vimanas are there. The Mahishasuramartini caves has got very good kapodas, kutas, and other things are very, very finely developed. And then the sculptures are the ultimate in Mahishasuramartini caves. Then Adivaraha, actually this is a cave, and then later on they have built an enclosure over it. It has got a stucco sculpture of Adivaraha, but the key thing is the king sculptures, the historical sculptures are the great one. And in Panchapandava thing, they have tried to create a Sandara, a circular path under the Vimana. It was a first attempt for a cave itself. Adirana Channa Mandapa is a different one, trying with Taralinga and nice inscriptions and a different structure. The cake is taken by the Tiger Caves. How do you call this? This is a stadium or a podium or a structure and a collection of yardis, a grandstand. So, if you see this in cave, in the front facade or in the mandapa, they have tried all the experimentations. Now, then it comes monoliths. Monoliths, the technology is cut out. We start from top and then we gradually cut it down into the bottom. So the first one and the great one to get focused is the shikaras. Here we see various combinations of shikaras in multiple styles. So Valayan Kutte Ratham, incomplete but beautiful Nagara Shikara, Ekatala. And then Pidari Ratham with the Dravida octagon Shikara, Tividala. We have Draupadi like a Dravida 4-side hut Shikara. No Griva or other Ajisthana components. And then we have Nagula Sakadeva Radha, proper complete apsidal temple with a apsidal Shikara. We have the grand Arjuna Ratha, which is a octagon shaped Shikara. The Bhima Ratha, where you have a Sala wagon top kind of Shikara. And then this is grand for Vishnu. And then they have also done an Sandara attempt to go have a supplementary path inside the Vimana. The pinnacle is the Dharmaraja Mandapam with octagonal Shikara. There they have tried Tiritala with a collection of putas, and then they have done Ashtanga Vimana here with paths in the 3 levels, and then there is some amount of innovations in stone. This is the only Ashtanga Vimana for Shiva. Then Ganesh Radha, the almost complete with the Sala Shikara. All these are by Pallavas. So Pandyas did the same thing, and their octagonal Shikara and Talas are fantastic structure, but unfortunately it stopped at that point of time. So during this, they are having a good handle on the types of Shikaras in monolithical structures. Then comes the structural constructions, where what was a open type temple for Sayana Vishnu, which is in the middle. It is a small temple, open temple. Later it was covered by Mahendra and other period. And then they built 2 structural temples on the Dravida style by 3 and 4 talas. And this became a standard. So if you see this, the first one is Rajasimeswaram facing west, and then second one is Satyashimeswaram facing east. So these 2 have set the standards for all the future structural temples. So they have also a small Vesara temple here inside the pond, and they had grand mandapa and then Maha Mandapa here along with the Prakara wall. Everything has been damaged, and only the remnants are available now. And here also the first Gopura-like structure, Pratholi, appears on the eastern temple. The Prakara wall with the Haras has got a elongated Sala Gopuram kind of a structure. So this is the starting of Gopuras in a simple way in Tamilnadu architecture. The next level is a temple which is unparalleled. We can't build, and we have not seen a temple like this. We won't see a temple like this. The unique one, the Kanji Kailasanatha temple, the structure, architecture, and the sculpture and the design, the inscriptions, it takes them all. And foreign kings, Chalukya kings, have come here to capture Kanchi. And having seen this temple in grand, they have stopped the idea. They have given more grants to the temple, and they did not destroy the temple. So this is unique temple. The first Sandhara temple in worship, like the effort started with Dharmaraja Mandapa, but this is the first Sandhara one where you have a circumambulatory path around the Garbhagriha. And this is the first extent Gopura. See, the normal opening was opened up, and a small temple was built by his son, Rajasimha's son, and then the rudimentary Gopura is here. This is called Padmamalya. This is not just one, 60 of them, small shrines complete from Adhisthana up to the Shikara, and each one containing superb sculptures about Shiva Purana and all the happenings. In addition, the temple itself, the normal koshtas are expanded and then put in as Anga Alayas. Around 7 additional Anga Alayas are there, which lends to the stability. This technology is further improved in later periods. And they introduced the leaping lion pillars. A joy of a temple which has got no equal. Even Rajaraja was impressed by this temple, and then he said that this is one of the models for building the grand big temple. Then, then comes the apartments of gods. Having seen the individual houses, the single house and the grand house, now they are coming into gated communities. So the first attempt was in Malay Dharmaraja temple. After this, the first living temple was tried by Nandivarma in Kanjipuram in Vaigandha Perumal temple with 3 series, and this is largely intact without any major renovations. This was continued by Nandivarma 3 by adding more structures here and then having up to 9 sanctums in layers. In Pandyas, they followed the same style. The first one was in Tirupathi SVITSA temple, which is a grand pavilion in the front, and this is where Namalvar did the Om Namo Narayana from this temple top. Then in Madurai city, next to the town hall road, there is a Kudaragar temple which was financed and then built by Periyalvar, and out of the funds he received as a gift. So this temple is a 3-tier structure, but we don't climb there up by inside the Vimana. There is an outside of Vimana direct entry path to all the 3 temples. So if you see this, these are the 3 pure Ashtanga Vimana where the pathway is inside the Vimana itself. Then Manar Koil. Manar Koil is in Tirunelveli area, later Pandya temple, which is also structured like an Ashtanga Vimana, but the catch is again the external, the first and second talas, we access it from outside, not inside the Vimana. The same style, Cheran Magadevi Ramasamy temple also of the same style. We access the Vimana from front side. In Chennai, we have a Ashtanga Vimana like temple where in Tirunirmalai, which is a Ranganatha temple at top the hill, where we have 4 steps. Normally in this Ashtanga Vimanas, we have 3 poses of Perumal. Sitting pose, standing pose, and then lying pose. Here we are seeing the 4th pose, walking pose or a stepping pose in the Vamana Trivikrama pose also. But the sanctums are not in a line like how it is done in these other temples. It are haphazard, so it is more of a Kashtanga Vimana, and they developed in wrong sequence. But we have 4 poses available here. It is very near to Chennai, in the suburbs. Another interesting temple which was recently built in the Chennai suburbs near the beach is the Vijayanagara Ashtarshimi temple. So this temple is based on the Uttarabhaira Sundavara temple, recently built in concrete, but for Ashtalakshmis. So this is a different style, and in this one, and done in concrete, and people visit this on auspicious days, and it is one of the city attractions. So this is how Ashtanga Vimanas started building around Pallava and Pandya period. If you see this, the structure is a complex one, and then let us see how it was built in stages. Basically, there is the first sanctum where for this I am taking Vaigandha Perumal temple as an example. So the first ground level sanctum is constructed by a grand wall and the level 1 sitting post. On top of it, there is a reclining post in the the second level, and the third level is a standing pose. This is missing, this icon is missing, but these three structures are there. Fourth is an empty structure, empty level, and fifth is an octagon shikara. So this entire structure is one vertical column and with one single wall. This is the first inner wall. After this, the second wall encloses the first covered prakara of this shrine 1 and carries up to shrine 2, and for the third shrine it forms an open platform. This is how it is. Shrine 1 and 2 it forms a prakara, and third one it is a open platform. Then there is a third level of wall which covers the first prakara of shrine 1, and then it goes into shrine 2 and then works as a platform similar to this. So this is how, if you cut it out and view, this is how this temple is structured. So very complex, and it requires some amount of good planning, like our modern day apartment thing. We need to be very clear on how each and every pillar will be going, and then how it is to be structured. This they did it in 1800. So this is how we built multi-story apartment complexes in 8th century. Now, next phase is by the imperial Cholas, who started getting control in 850, and then they continued up to 1180. During their period, it was a goal of standardizing all the content, all the components, and then they built the small temples which were there, they built it to a grand scale. So during this time, the focus was more on the entire Tamilnadu, parts of Kerala and parts of Andhra and other things was under them. So they had a lot of influence, and then Chalukya was an equal power at that point of time. So during this, the key architectural points for Cholas is the granite finish was very good, well finished, because workmanship engineering is very good. The famous lion pillars are missing in Chola temples. They are more into kumbhas and sambas, and then only in very late period they appear again. Lot of experimentation in varieties of adhishtanas, hara components, and ornamentation of walls continues. The temples were big, grand compared to the Pallava period, and even though they are grand, if you see the early Chola phase, they excelled in miniature sculptures which have not been done in many scale even at a very late stage, except Kurungudi and Tirupathi and other areas in the late Nayaka period. So exterior walls were more simple with more costumes and kumbhapancharas, and then this gave them a lot of space for putting inscriptions. So these are the three major temples in the period which are UNESCO monuments: Tanjavur, Gangakonda Solapuram, and Tarasam. If you see the architectural innovations and the component development in Chola period, each king has tried to experiment something, and some innovations were done during the particular period. So let us see for each king what are the innovations, and then some of the sample temples where these innovations can be identified as coming for the first time. So the first one, Vijayanagara, during the Vijayanagar period, his feudatories built a grand temple in Athamalai, which is a mix of Vesara and Nagara, and And the interesting concept of 8 substrains started here. We have the remnants. And his son Aditya's period, a lot of the Badrams or the central salas become bigger, and then they were constructing a lot of stone vimanas. So this you can see from Tirupathi temple onwards. And in Nageshwaram temple, we are seeing a lot of, this is the period where a lot of miniature panels and beautiful poster sculptures started appearing. Focuses on posters and sculptures. And this is where the miniature panel trend starts, and this continues in the later temples, in some of the later temples also. The next king, Parantaka, the key thing is Kulamangai temple. Fortunately, this temple was submerged or covered in sand and restructured or recovered at a very late period. So many of the sculptures are in pristine state. This is where the costumes get expanded from the standard 3 costumes to 5 costumes with 2 more additions in Mandapa. This is Vinayaka and Durga. Then comes the next thing. The talas also get expanded and then lengthy, and sometimes the first tala gets replicated with long walls, tall walls like first tala. This is this trend we can see from Srinivasaram. And from Ponce and others onwards, Parantaka adds 2 more to the Deva Kostas with the Sapta Deva Kostas, and more Devatas, and then more structure on this. For the Sundara Chola and the wife of Kandaraditya, Sembian Mahadevi, they also did a lot of work and then expanding the Deva Kostas. Now we have 9 Deva Kostas, and Deva Kosta starts appearing in Mahamandava, like Agastya and Nataraja, and a lot of Bhikshadana start appearing in Deva Kostas. Then the grandest innovation of our comes in Rajaraja period. He has done a lot of small temples and then medium temples, but the pinnacle is Tanjavur, where he tries the 2 tala. This is the entire temple is double temple. 2 tala sanctum, 2 tala, all the mandavas 2 talas, and we have Santaras in 2 talas. With we will see that in detail. Kumbha Panjaras, and then four openings in temple. These are the innovations which he tried in the big temple. His son did 1 level more. Actually, he tried 3 tala Santara, not 2 tala. And then the internal carveling is done in such a way in the temple that the Vimana itself is like a Sthula Linga, starting from square and then moving over to hexagon and a circular pattern inside. So this is like a Sthula Linga. Later on, down the line after 2-3 generations, Kulotunga, who shifted from Vengi, who continued the Chalukya Chola dynasty, he brought some of the impact of Vengi, and he started building sun temples in a big way, and he started building the first Ratha Vimana. Probably this was also an influencing factor for building the Konark temple at a later point of time. So the innovation here is that the costumes got extended, and then the first tala with only Karnakur. This is the innovations he did in that. Rajaraja too, down the line, did some more innovations, and they started with Darasaram, having a Rathamandapa, and then building a separate Kamakotam, like for Parvati, there is a separate temple. Balipidams and then Dvajastamba got more ornamental and built with a musical Balipidam. And again, the period of miniatures come back, and this time for the Periya Purana, 64 panels. Finally, the last spark is Kulotunga 3, the big temple in Tirubhuvanam. The Vimana with the three types of Karnakutas, square, and then later on it moves into hexagon Karnakutas, and then circular Karnakutas, the small mini temples and the corners. This is where the Gopuram starts getting bigger than the Vimana. The trend starts from here. So if you see this is how over a period of around 400 to 450 years, the various innovations like Pallavas have come, and then it changes the look of the temple. So we can see some of the hallmark temples, Vijayanagara in the early period. If you see this was commissioned by Muttariyars, the feudatories, and this has got a square tala. But interestingly, circular Garbhagraham, circular Griva, Shikara, everything. And then we have a circumambulatory Sandara passage inside that. If you come to first year, the first hara is an anarpita with a gap or alindam pathway, and instead of simply having the semblance of kudus or the shikaras alone, now we are seeing full-fledged mini vimanas with elongated tall walls. The second hara is an arpita hara, which is connected to this one with no pathway. And then interesting thing is around this we see Ashtaparivara temples coming up with different variations for different, this is for Ganesha, this is for Muruga, like that. So this is a trendsetter. Another trendsetter for Aditya is Tirupuranam. This is the Tirupuranam temple. A typical pure Nagara granite Vimana and with a square Shikara. And the extensive use of Nagala Stambas. This is pillars like this, which are not actually architectural members which take the load, which are part of the wall and then they are ornamental. This is called Nagala Stambas. They appear extensively in Mahanasis. The wall portions are very tall, like you can see from the earlier one, which used to be like this, now it is extended. The Sala Kudus are, instead of being a simple one, now it is stretched with a Mahanasi, and then with the stretch we have two additional members with Rasputika coming in this. Coming to the bottom, there are more innovations. The Karnakudas are having circular tops, circular shikaras instead of the traditional square shikaras. The Bhadrasalas are extended, the same design continues here. Now, instead of having a single Devakostam here, we have three Devakostams in the Bhadrasala itself. There is an innovation. Interestingly, we have Kostams in the Salilandra, but the Karna Salas are left blank. And we have variations of pillars and palagas with the Naga Mandi, Padma Mandi, and normal elliptical Mandis available here. Next thing is, grand thing is Apulamangai temple, which is again a innovation or a sculpture's delight. The interesting things here are that the vertical salas, instead of being at the same plane, the salas are getting extended out with their own extension up to the Adhisthana and all the basement, all the way up to the top, it is getting extended. So now, with the shikaras and then other things, it looks like an individual temple itself. Instead of 3 costas, now 5 costas with the Vinayaka and Durga getting added in the Ardhamandapa portion. Now we start seeing Kapota Panjaras, which are the Panjaras like the temple like pillar structures, which are getting extended to the level of the Prastara, the roof area, and then they have a Kapotam top. They are called Kapota Pancharas. The earlier Pancharas were mostly Nishkrantara Pancharas, which are below the Prastara level. And we see lot of Sudra Vimanas in the Nasikas, here and here. We see all small Vimana type of structures in the Nasikas. And in this area, in the Patika, in the Adhisthana, we see two series, Ramayana series coming from there, from that circular, and then Krishna on this side. Complete details. Excellent miniatures. And now we are coming to the pinnacle, Rajarajeshwaram, built in Tanjavur. The Rajarajeshwaram is a structure by itself. See, it is called Dakshina Meru for the pyramidal pinnacle, and it is also called Devalaya Chakravarti, the king of all temples, or the emperor of all temples, because of the innovations and the way it is done. The facts are there. The tallest and largest Dravida Vimana with the 14 talas. In Agamas we define up to 14, 15, and it touches the pinnacle. Interesting thing is, this is done without any plastering or any metal joints like other temples. It is pure precision work with the structural interlocking between the members. We have two levels of Sandhara, and the first level of Sandhara here, it has got sculptures and paintings, and the second level Sandhara here has got Karana, the 108 Karanas dance sculptures are here in the second level Sandhara. The sanctum also stretches up to two levels, and we have a false ceiling set up here. And the mandapas, they themselves also stretch to two levels. The first level is damaged. Around this place we have Deva questions, 21 of them around this. In the entire complex, including this, and in the Prakara, we have 64 Parivara Devatas in total, including Ekadasa Rudras, and then Dikpalas and all the Parivara Devatas. We have 64 Parivara Deva maximum. And it houses the largest lingam in this area, except the Bhojeshwaram. So let us see Brihadeshwara. Now we saw the cut-up view. Now let us see the top-down view and the bottom-up view. So if you see from top, even Rajaraja would not have seen this. The precision and the alignment stands out like anything. So on the corner we see all the Karnakutas aligning up and coming up. In the center we see all the Bhadrasalas coming up, extending, and then we have the Pradibhadras or Panjaras coming in between, in a line to a central Shikara and the Stupi. This is from an outside view. If you see from inside, this is how it looks. From the second tier onwards, the corbelling starts. The first level of corbelling is square, and then gradually it goes into 6-sided, 8-sided octagon, and then gradually towards the end it ends in a circular one. This is equivalent to a Stula Linga, which is having square octagon and circular parts. Not only the Vimana, even the Gopura in the front is of the same structure of corbelling. This is the front Gopura. This is the way above the first level. Instead of having a continuous, these are the two facing parts with the opening, and there is a gap in between to reduce the load and structure. So this is how, if you look at from a bottom up. Now we are going to see in brief about 4 of the grand living Chola temples. The UNESCO World Heritage list only 3, but Logically, the fourth one also should have included. They deliberately, the temple wriggled out of it. Temple management wriggled out of it. So they are one, the Rajeshwaram temple in Tanjavur, and the second one built by in Gangakonda Cholapuram. The third one is Rajarajeshwaram in Dharasuram, and the fourth one, Tirubhuvana temple by Kulatanga. These are the four big temples, and let us see in brief about what is common among them and what are the differences. So now let us see the common features. If you see this, they are all of them are named after originally the kings who built them, and then they are in current worship on a regular basis, except big temple which was on a break for some time. And from building, it has been receiving continuous support from all dynasties with expansion. And they are the four tallest Jati Vimanas of Chola temples. And for Dravidian style of temples, they are the top. They are built on high basement, and the Deva Kostas are extensive with very good descriptive panels. The arches on the temple have grand Simhamukha finials, and the mandabas have very big pedestals with the grand steps. The Artha Mandapa and Maha Mandabas also continue with the two talas. And then the other interesting thing is that the Gopuras, all of them have the Gopuras and the Tiruchuttumani, the Prakaras were built at the time of inception of the temple itself. Unlike many of the other temples which are open, and then later on the Gopuras and the Prakaras were built around it in Lanka period. These existed from day one with the proper Prakaras. Now seeing the difference, so we are listing some of the attributes of the temple among the four. And if you see this in terms of the earliest, Rajarajeshwaram take the cake, and then this is the grandest temple with the tallest Vimana of 230 plus feet. And this is the only octagon Sikara, whereas the others are having circular Vesara Sikaras. And this touches the peak with the 14 talas up to the Agama limit. In terms of Kudas, the Karna Kudas are the small temples that are there in the Haras or the Talas. The earlier two temples were having Anga 4-part small mini shrines, whereas the Airavateswara and Kambareswara has got 6 parts. In terms of Devakosta, Gangakonda Cholapuram takes the cake, where in Aditala we have 5 kostams, and in first Tala it expands up to 9 kostams, and it is full of structures. When I take the sanctum or the Santara circular passage goes up to 2 levels in Rajarajeshwaram, whereas it goes up to 3 levels in Gangakonda Cholapuram. And then that is where it joins, the 2 walls join together. In terms of the other mandabas, these two have 2 talas, and the other ones are only having 1 tala. All of them have very good perimeter walls, and for the first 2 temples, the second perimeter wall has been damaged. And Gopuram also, this has got 2 Gopurams. Other one is for these 2 Gopurams are there, 2 are damaged. And Kambareswara has got all the 2 Gopurams in fact. And then this is the point where your Gopurams and Vimanas are becoming almost equal. So after this, the Cholas, the trend and other things set up by Cholas. So it is like Dhoni retiring and then Virat Kohli taking over. The style continues on the same pace with the same people structure. Pandyas were doing some amount of work under the Cholas. Okay, when they take over finally Cholas and continues for another 150 years, they were ruling the entire Tamil Nadu and some parts of this one. So during the period, the work of Cholas, of the grand Vimanas and then structures are start. So they start focusing in Gopuras. Gopuras, they are the kings in terms of sculptural beauty. So much of sculptures were done by Pandyas in the Gopuras during the period, and some amount of work on the outlying portions, and then mandapa changes, and then outer walls. So this is a turbulent period where the temples were built as fortress with walls and then towering gopuras. Some of the good examples are the Madurai temple, where it was built extensively by Pandyas, but probably during the Muslim invasion in 1300, it was destroyed to a great extent and it was rebuilt during Vijayanagara period. The other interesting contribution during later period is also some amount of contribution to the Srirangam temple, and the other major area is in Sridivittur, where you get the grand Gopura, which was built at a later point of time. One good example, which is the many of the temples were smaller in Pandya period, and many were renovated and expanded to a great extent by later Vijayanagara. But one of the very later and old temple is in Tenkasi, built by Kasi Viswanatha. This is Parakrama Pandya, done in 1500. This is during Vijayanagara period and under his rule. It has 180 feet Gopura, grand one, beautiful one, with the classic work of a lot of stuccos details in this. 180 feet Gopura with 9 colors, and you can climb up to the top. Again, permission is in challenge. This was badly damaged in 1824, and then up to this it was split, and it remained like that till 1960s. And it was renovated and finished in 1990, somewhere during the same time like after the Srirangam South Gopura. This has got a Shiva shrine and Amman shrine facing east together, and the front mandapa built by later Vijayanagara period has got excellent sculptural pillars of Veerabhadra, Rati, Manmada. This is the hallmark of later Pandyas and Vijayanagara period. Coming to the next dynasty, Vijayanagara kings, who liberated and then brought Tamil Nadu under control during the initial period from Harihara Bukka. And then later on, their representatives, Nayakas, continued to rule even after fall of Vijayanagara. During Vijayanagara, it was again an united Hindu empire. The entire major lower part of South India was ruled by them. So they had a challenge in undoing all the damages and structures done by the Muslim invasion during 1300s, and after that they recovered from this and then built walls and other security measures around temples, and then they tried to build it in their own style. So if you see the period between 1300 and 1700, the major activities were many of the open areas around the first Garbhagriha and the government. If you see any big temple, this entire area is covered, roofed. This is one of their major works. Again, they started making bigger gopurams than Pandyas, but mostly they were with a lot of pillars rather than with sculptures. But internally in mandapas, they refined pillar technology to the peak, and they built mandapas. They are mandapa specialists, and then they built every varieties of mandabas as an extension all over the place. And then this is being a concentric series of either opened or closed prakaras around this, which extends to 7 prakaras in Trichy, Sri Lanka. This is the till now, except in some rare cases, we don't know who the king is, and in some cases we know who the sculptor is. Okay. And this is the period where clear idols of sponsor kings and queens start appearing in the mandabas they built. In fact, in many of the mandabas, there will be big line of all the kings available there. And then this is a period where temple tanks and then temple cities started building them. Example is this Rameswaram Grand Corridor, longest corridor in this. And the Madurai 1000 pillar temple, which is adorned by sculptural pillars, and this is by the extended anivertical pillars. So the technology to build this wider pillars allowed them to create a mandabas with wide angle and a grand space. They also tried different pillars, like the fully ornamental pillar here, and then the multi-pronged pillars in Sri Lanka, which can handle a wider width and a heavy load, and then they could build grander mandabas, bigger and stronger. One of the hallmarks, even though Madurai Meenakshi temple has been there for ages. Okay, this is the look at this. See the number of gopuras, vimanas, and this is the core temple, and this is the subsidiary temple, and this is the Kottamarai tank. This has been there since ages, and it has been built, expanded by up to Pandyas. But most of the major work has been damaged during the Islamic invasion. Only a few gopuras and some of the structures escaped. It was extensively renovated and restructured by Viswanatha Nayaka, and then he built it according to the agamas and then structures by the rectangular concentric structures, naming all the streets and things based on Tamil months. So this has got 14 gopuras, the tallest one in south being at 170 feet. It has got around 14 plus mandavas in between. All of them, if you see this is during a Brahmotsavam, where the crowd is, this is on the roof, the entire crowd is on the roof. You can see how much covered enclosures is there. The main sanctum is an Indra Vimana, which was built at a later point of time, restructured, and with the Airavadam elephants standing on all the costumes, and it looks grand in the black granite and polished to the core. Fantastic stuff. And the 1000-pillar mandapa here is the grand structure, and it is a museum. Each pillar is a museum by itself with so much of clarity, so much of artwork. So this entire thing is covered with a little open space, and it is like a fortress. A bigger and grander structure is Tirurangam. It is the ultimate temple city. You can say that this is the largest temple, functioning Hindu temple in the world. Angkor Wat is bigger, but again, it is not an active worship out of India. And this is one of the 3 temples. When I say Koil, it is Srirangam. Malai means Tirupathi. Perumal means Vadarata Perumal. This is by simple. So Reference and then details from our Sangam days, and it has been consistently developed. It has seen so many wars, so many fights, and occupation during Muslim period, and all this is documented fairly well in the Koil. Maximum number of gopurams 21 in all four directions. The tallest one being 240 feet, which was recently structured in 1970s. It is still in the UNESCO tentative list and then being pushed for a heritage site. Recently, around the last 6 or 7 years, it has been renovated as per Agamas, and all the unwanted intermediate structure has been cleaned out, and it looks beautiful now with a lot of open spaces which was earlier closed. You should be spending around one full day in this temple. See the alignment of gopuras and the central Vimana in between. Beautiful structure. On the background is the Kaveri. This is the temple city by itself, where it can contain the entire city with so many things. 7 prakaras. 5 prakaras constitute the temple. The remaining 2 prakaras are outer settlement. 156 acres, 50 plus shrines inside this, and 31 mandavas, various styles, various forms in between, and 9 water tanks spread over the place, 3 wells. And we have granaries, kotarams for the entire city. Inside this, there is a big granary. And during some of the famine times, during monsoon, the kings have approached for loan from granary on payment for supplying food to the needy. So this is how a small Garbhagraha or single cell temple was expanded into a grand temple city with its own support in between. Now we are seeing after the 1700 how temples are built in the current era. We are happy to see that the Dravidian styles has not changed much, but the usage instead of lime mortar, it is concrete, iron shell, flexible, very easy to build the temples. But happy to see that even the small temples are built as per the agamas, and the basic components and rigidly done. Another interesting thing is, during the Natukote Chettiar Nagarathas, there has been excellent renovation in the 1800 and 1900 things with the very fine sculptures. But it has also created a lot of confusion. The interesting ones being the sculptures of guys in cycle, Sudandara Devi, and all the latest 1900 related motifs are there in many of the outer mandavas. So this leads to a lot of WhatsApp forward saying that our guys are great. They invented cycle in 1700 or 700 or all sorts of fancy forwards. Most of this work is in the outer peripheral of the mandavas done by Nagarathar work. The other damaging work for temples is that the old temples are getting renovated with fancy mosaic tiles, paintings, and then the latest horror is Rameswaram temple, where the entire corridor and the things were painted with multicolored dresses. So some of the examples of modern temples is the one very recent one built in Kanyakumari as a replica of Tirupathi temple model. So the temple is in first tower. The entire ground floor is full of mandavas where you can have any number of functions, any number of gatherings. The other big one is the Golden Temple in Vellore. It is built in a circular style or in a Shatkonam kind of structure with a central golden painted Vimana. But the thing that takes the cake is the pedestal or the Madakoil type of Vimana, which is there in the rudimentary. If you see this, this is a temple built in apartment house, and the ground floor is like a temple there is one. So the actual temple is in the floor. They converted in a temple with its own coast, its own hara, and then its own roof and thing. This is on first floor. So even though the modern times have come, the concepts and structures, they remain as it is. Having seen the evolution of various structures in temples from Pallava up to Nayaka period, there are some simple clues to identify whether a component is done by Pallava, Chola or Nayaka or some. So there are 3 pointers. One, if you look at the pillar carvel, okay. So during Pallava period, it was just like the blunt, and then it had the Vettu Podiga or Taranga Podiga, which are normally on in 7th century or 8th century. Mostly the innermost Prakara or Atta Mandapa will have this kind of structures. During Chola period, they changed it into cut Podiga and then Vettu Podiga and then with a elongated one. And then Pandya changed it into a flower kind of a motif. So many of the Adda Mandapa, Maha Mandapa and front Mandapas normally will be having this kind of an pillar design. When it comes to Vijayanagara, this expanded into a flat, and then it started coming out as a small banana flower with an arch here. Then it expanded into far more larger arch. So this will be typically seen in all the outer mandapas and 1,000 pillar mandapas, Snana mandapas. This is where you will be seeing it in the Vijayanagara or Nayaka period. So by looking at the pillar and then and then looking at where it is, you will be able to see which period it was structured. Similarly, the pillar also, if you see this, during the Pallava period, this is how the pillars look like, and which got refined with more detailed palaka and more ornamental stuff, and during the Chola period. And later Pandya, they started developing this flower motif here like this, and then more pronounced with more components. But by the time of Vijayanagara, ornamental with like a banana flower like of hanging on both sides, and then this got expanded in more areas. So again, this is another pointer for identifying the period. Now looking at the arches that are there in the temples or in Nasikas or in Kapota, you can also identify the ages. One is in early Buddha period, this is how the arch was looking, Chaitya arches, then it got converted. And during Pallava period, the shovel-like appearance, and it was like more. In early Chola, it turned semicircular, and lion motif started appearing here. During later Chola period, this semicircle became an actual circle. This area got expanded. And in Pandya period, it becomes like a Dharma Chakra with the floral motif, with a eagle sitting on top. Vijayanagara this area become smaller and smaller, and the outer embellishment become bigger. Now, the ultimate is a modern standard flat structure. This is the same component which is getting repeated. So by this, we will be able to see whether the particular segment or the mandapa is of what period. So far in the last hour, we have seen how the dynasties have helped us to build innovations in various areas in Tamilnadu. Now in the last part, for the next 10 minutes, you are going to see some unique temples and constructions and engineering structures. So this is one of the old temple, the full Gajabristam temple, done in a different way. It looks like a diesel engine. So structural engineering. So the motive was like how we see in advertisement, bigger, wider and taller. So during the initial attempts were cut-in caves. So they tried to do big mandabas, and then the top one was the Rockfort lower cave, which was a fairly big enclosure. And from there, they started cutting top-down approach, where they start building cutout monoliths, and then they experimented it to a certain extent by having 3 levels of hollow structures with Sandara and Ashtanga Vimana type of model. But again, in solid stone and then cutting, they can do only so much. So the next technology is instead of going and then hunting for temples, they started hunting, cutting mountains into small rock chunks and started building this. So this is where the structure started with Malay, where component-based engineering started happening. Again, so this is the base for all the future temples where we structure on this. But again, when we start building it, the base may not be able to handle the amount of granite on the superstructure. So the innovation or refinement was up to Prastara, it was done in granite, and the top superstructure is done in Sudai or in brick and mortar. So that reduced the load on the temple. The next innovation was building to bigger temples. The entire basement was done like the first tala of the temple, and then the actual temple is in the second tala. The first tala will be having all the ornamentations like a temple, but the entire thing is filled. It's actually technically a basement and it is filled. The temple proper starts from first tala only. So this was another attempt, one historical, other one to have a good base for a bigger temple. That is another way of engineering. The other experimentation was, as the size of the temple increases, like the northern temples, they extended the 4 questions there, extended out and then put them as mini temples, Kandaharmiyas, so that the lateral load of the temple is spread sideways on four areas. So the first experiment on this happened in Panamalai Talagisra by Rajasimha. Later on, he refined it in a better way in Kanji Kailasanatha by introducing Sandara also, where you have 2 levels of walls to take the load, and then you can have a bigger and a stronger Vimana. Here, instead of only having 3 Angalayas, here we have 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Angalayas, and the 2 on front are part of the entrance complex. So by this method, they also try to have a wider base so that you can take heavy load and you can have taller temples. Then Nandivarma period and other things, they tried to optimize the vertical space available by building more Vimanas, more sanctums inside the Vimana itself as a shell. One, it reduces the weight of granite, and then we utilize the entire space as multiple sanctums. So this is an attempt, and then it raised to a series of temples in the Ashtanga style. Again, this is complex engineering, and then we can't take skyscrapers kind of structure out of this. So the ultimate technological innovation is in the Mahameru Tanjai temple, where they did the corbelling, they did the Sandara 2-layer, 3-layer Sandara, where the solid base is there, and then on top of it 14 talas of pure granite, heavyweight granite, and then with no joints. and then no pasting, purely on proper alignment and then slide joints, and it is held in place by around less than 6 feet or 10 feet kind of an basement digging. The entire thing is controlled by the 80-ton weight of the shikara and the combined weight of these talas. So ultimate in engineering. So this is how, from a simple cave temple and rudimentary temples, the Tamilnadu Dravidian temple architecture progressed in building grand granite temples. Now let us see some unique creations. And when we build the temple contracts, there are some excellent works in Tamil Nadu. When a new Stapathi is asked to do a temple work, so in their normal agreement or in contracts, the Purana and other content say that they used to exclude something, say that these are all like the Kailasanatha temple, it is all excellent work. I won't be able to do this work, but I can do anything else. So let us see, they say there are around 8 temples. I could trace only 1 or 2. These are the one, the Vaval Mandapa in Tirupathi. The entire thing is shaped like a dome, and the structure, it is done in such a way that the bats, vavals, cannot hang on to the inner side of the temple because it's on the slope and they won't have any grip on them. To have such a long mandapa and such a wide mandapa without any pillars in between is an engineering feat at the time. The other exclusion is the extensive work of Kodungai, which is extended by Kapoda in a convex way. The third example is the Jalaka work, which is there in Tiruvalanjudi, and this was done during later Kulothunga and later period, and the extensive work of cutting this into finer holes is done all over the place. So this is all exceptional work, which the Stapathis normally say that I won't be able to do this exceptional work, but I can do anything else. There is a confidence and the pride, professional pride they had. We will see some of the unique different temples. One temple is the pedestal temples, which started from Kochakanan period, Chola period. This is all early medieval. So there is a Purana which says that during his earlier birth he was an elephant, and he and a spider were praying for a temple, and finally the spider used to build a web around the linga, and then the elephant used to clean this. There was a fight, and the spider killed the elephant. So the spider was born on as a Kochang and Chola in his next birth. There is a Purana. So he built temples on first floor with steps where elephants cannot climb. That is one of the assumptions. But the good thing is, all these temples were built around the Kaveri river and other areas where they are prone to flood, and then they are built in high pedestals. So the first floor is an like a Aditala with all the ornaments, but it is a completely filled. Actual temple proper starts from the second floor. So this is Uttarakosamangai near Rameswaram, and there was an actual Kochankana and Chola period pedestal, and they say that it is the birthplace of his wife. The other interesting temple is the Trilokanatha. It's a Jain temple, and this is the first earliest available pedestal temple or Mada Koil, which we can see, which has not undergone any change. This has undergone many changes. We don't know what is the original structure, but this is fairly untouched. This is Pallava period, and then you could see this is the entire filling. We enter here through a staircase, go to the front, and from there we can go through the prakara. So this is filled. This is a different style. There are a lot of around 60, 50 modern temples strewn around the Tanjavur area, the Kaveri belt, and some are there in the Pallava and Pandya region. The other interesting thing is multiple vimanas. This is Tirupathi. The smaller one, back one, is for Shiva temple. Later on, they built a Muruga temple in front, and which has got a bigger vimana for Muruga. The extreme case, it is a Madakoil, but see the amount of vimanas built in various, it has got three major strains, Thoniyapar, Satyanathan, and Brahmapuriswara temple. And then see the amount of vimanas built in haphazard fashion. It is a development over periods. This is influence of Hoysalas during the Hoysala period, constructed in Samayavaram near Trichy. Very good structure with some amount of Hoysala influence. The interesting thing about is the double sala vimana. Normally the central Bhadra sala is only single. Here we have double sala, and then you have two salapathis. The other one is Vadak Kurangadu. The first tala and second tala, instead of just having the griva, they have extended to the full length, and then putting as though like a Madakoil. But in essence, it is a ground level temple only. One of the different temples is in Tiruvallai, which is near Trichy. Excellent temple, but it fully damaged or left in portion. Now the IIT Madras, along with the traditional Stapathis, reach and everybody, they are trying to reconstruct and then build it into a full structure. The interesting thing, another interesting thing about this temple is that it has got two entrances, one for Uttarayana and then Dakshinayana, part of the sun's travel, and then we have two entrances. So during Uttarayana 6 months, this entrance will be open and this will be closed. This also contains the only instance of a grand stepwell in Tamilnadu. There are some 2 or 3 stepwells in Pallava period, but they are all single side. This is the grand swastik shaped stepwell built in 800 late Pallava period. It is by Alambakathu Vijayanagara Nallulan Thambi Kambanarayan. This is under late Nandi period, and this is one of the rare stepwells available in Tamilnadu. So with this, we have seen how the dynasties were built, the temples to a grand one, and then we have seen how the engineering has developed from small cave temple to the grandest Mahamiri type of temples, and then we have seen some different exquisite temples also. So to conclude this, now you are familiarly, after seeing these 3 lectures, you should be having a fairly good understanding on the temple units, the components, and how they evolved over a period. So next time, my request to you is explain this knowledge and then propagate the knowledge to others. And also next time when you visit the temple, you see it in the following ages. As you enter the Gopuram, see the tiers and the sculptures of the local Puranas. They convey the Purana stories, and the local stories also are normally there in the Gopuram sculptures. When you enter, you see how the Torana, Balipidam, Dwajastamba, Vahana are there. And this is the area in Pandya temples and other area where maximum sculptures like the sculptural pillars are there. Then when you actually enter the Muhammadabad through steps, look on top on the balcony and see the Kapotham and then Kodungai and how they are structured and what is the stories and the panels that are there as on the sides of the steps. Once you enter Mahamandapa, see the type of pillars, what period they belong to, how the cornice and the capital are structured, just the age, and then see the windows, how they are structured. In the roof, how much of ornamentation is there. When you come to Ardhamandapa, before we start praying, you can see the Dwarapalakas, what type of style, what indication, what kind of weapons they have. On the lintel, there will be Gajalakshmi Navagraha. And on top of it, there will be Bodhakanas in trees. You start observing all these things. In the sanctum, you see what is the main deity. In addition, in what structure it is there, and then is there any background sculptures. During Pallava period in Shiva temples, we used to have the Somaskanda panel on the background. So if you see a Somaskanda panel on the background, it is definitely a Pallava period temple. And you see the Pradakshana Pada, whether we have a Sandhara path around this, or you have only normal prakaras outside. And see what are the types of them. After praying, when you come out in the sanctum walls, in the prakaras, you see how many Devakostas are there, where they are located, and what is the direction. The standard directions are there for each Devakosta. And see the Toranas, pilasters, and the sculptures and try to identify them. And then you go to one corner and then look up and see how many tiers are there. And see whether you are able to identify the mini temples, the Karmakutas in the corner, and then Badras or Salas in the middle, and Panjaras in between, and identify how many segmentations are there, how they are aligned. Then look up and see the shape of Shikara, whether it is Nakara, Vesara, and see whether the Griva, Shikara and everything is in alignment with the base plan. And then look around and see how many substrains are there, where they are located, and you will get a hang on the southeast corner. You are always going to southwest corner. You are always going to get Ganapati, and then northwest corner you are going to see Muruga. Like that, you will know where the substrains will be located. So this is how I would like you to explore based on the insight, and then enjoy temples and enjoy the art and architecture of Dravidian temples. So thank you. This finishes the last part of the three-part series of Dravida temple architecture. We covered three components. One, the way the temple worship and the evolution of various styles of temple building evolved. Number two, of the three, we saw Dravida temples in detail and its components. Number three, today, we saw how the Dravida architecture temples were supported, expanded by various dynasties, and the way the engineering is developed. So thank you for patiently listening. I am looking forward to the feedback, comments, and encouragements to continue further. If you have any doubts or clarifications, you can contact me at this things, or you can watch the previous parts in my YouTube channel, Babu for Heritage, and you can correct me in Facebook. So until we meet in person or connect in the next video, goodbye and thank you again. So thank you for watching another interesting session on Dravida temple architecture in detail. So like this, please see the earlier two parts of the series, one on the temple evolution, the other one on detailed component description on the Dravida temple architecture. There is also one interesting video on what temples tell us, the sculptures, the architecture, the inscription, and the temple components, how they talk about history and all the data behind the temples. So happy watching and thanks for the support. If possible, and then if you are interested, please subscribe to the channel for getting more updates and more interesting. Thank you and have a nice day.